Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, come on. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the fall 2018 celebration of Valley Voices here in the New River Valley. I want to praise and thank you all for coming out to support the arts on this lovely winter day, which I was not expecting. I'm pretty sure that we're all glad for this beautiful warm start to December, but also you're in a place where there will be some good snacks, some delicious coffee, and some wonderful writers. My name is Brittany Harris, and I'm on theater faculty at Virginia Tech, and I'm your MC this afternoon. Having just moved here to Blacksburg in August, I am so excited to be a part of the Valley Voices tradition, and I am so honored in assisting and rounding out the 17th cycle of this celebration year. I want to remind everyone that we are a volunteer organization, and to keep things going, we need volunteers. There are many different ways that you can help us keep going, from putting up flyers, organizing events, to helping out with technology, bringing in new ideas. Almost anything you can do, we can use. So if you enjoy our programs and you want to continue to see the literary arts continue, please go to our email on the back of your programs and send us a note and say, we want to join you. Or speak directly with some of our members of the steering committee. Could our steering committee just raise their hands throughout the room? Nice, here, look at that. Thank you guys. Come in. See, as you can see, it takes about a village to keep these events going. And we are grateful to the Blacksburg Public Library for hosting us, the Lyric Theater for our public service announcements and rehearsal spaces, and Richard Goff for video production. Thank you to all of our readers that are presenting this afternoon. And of course to the Valley Voices Steering Committee for planning and putting this event together. Now, at this time, I ask that you turn off your cell phones and remember no flash photography during the reading. So, our first reader today is Miss Julia Fallon. A little bit about Julia. She's a resident of Blacksburg, Virginia, and a North Carolina native. She enjoys reading, friends, family, and just having fun. Writing is a new interest of hers. Julia Fallon reading The Cocktail Dress.
The cocktail dress. Nip it. Make it tight. Make it right. Rip it. Seam is wrong. Not for long. Slip it. Wearing time. So sublime. Zip it. Put it on. Color fawn. Sip it. Martini. Certainly. Flip it. Dance the night until light. The cocktail dress.
Very nice. Our next writer is Jack Hankey. Jack has had over 40 years in the career of a special education teacher. That career started in South Dakota and included stops in Maryland, California, and Ohio before he and his wife Jan ended up back in Blacksburg in 1991. Jack has a new position this year, teaching job skills to young adults at the Cora Leon New River Valley Clinic. Much of his writing has been about his childhood as he and his 6 siblings grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Jack Hankey reading The Ice Cream Man.
I would often walk down 3 blocks on Wellington Street to visit my friend Bobby Maloney. Bobby Maloney. Due to his unfortunate initials, he'd insist on being called Robert. Bobby's mom worked at St. Matthias School, Bobby was in my class at St. Mary's. The Maloneys lived on the nicer end of Wellington. The houses were mainly 2 stories, containing both more and larger rooms. It never seemed quite right to me that Bobby had his own private bedroom. I shared one with Tom, Chris, and baby Andy. Bobby and I would often get together on days that St. Mary's was closed for a religious holiday, or on one of those glorious days in June when parochial schools were done, but the public school kids were still in session. This was one of those perfect June days. Bobby and I had pretty much exhausted his pile of board games. It was getting to be mid-afternoon. Bobby's mom would usually hand me a treat, a cookie, something before sending me home. On this particular day, she handed us each a handful of coins and suggested we catch the ice cream truck, which had just started making its summer runs earlier that week. Bobby and I took our money and we sat on the front step to listen for the distinctive tinkle of the ice cream truck bells. "What do you feel like getting today, Jack?" asked Bobby. "Well, I'm not sure. Those eclairs are good, but I might just get a fudge bar." "Yeah, there's nothing like a fudge bar. Did you hear that?" I had heard. I was up and running across the yard as I shouted, "It sounds like the truck is down at the end of the street." Bobby was close behind. We quickly found ourselves at the corner and spotted the white Mr. Henry's ice cream truck parked across the street to the left of the entrance to the neighborhood elementary school, Gaywood Elementary. Now, there's a name that would probably not get used today. I know at the time we made fun of the image of silly, laughing children trying to learn their reading and math under oaks and sycamore trees, but that was the extent of any teasing back in those days. In addition to getting our ice cream, Bobby and I would get to enjoy watching the envy on the faces of the public school kids as they walked home and noted that we were already enjoying our summer vacation. Our ice cream would taste doubly sweet. Then, another truck pulled up to the right of the entrance to Gaywood. The Good Humor Man had arrived and turned on his pre-recorded music to play through a small speaker mounted to the roof of his truck. Mr. Henry was a local operator that actually used an older, junked Good Humor truck as his vehicle. It had seen better days. There were rough spots, dents, and faded photos of frozen confections peeking out from between the more recent pictures that had been taped or glued over them. The Good Humor truck was brand spanking new. Tires shone as brightly as the chrome. The ice cream pictures surrounding the small freezer doors were of photo quality. Mr. Henry wore what appeared to be painter's clothes, while the Good Humor Man wore a crisp white uniform with various embroidered patches. There was a definite difference in eye appeal between the two vendors. The Gaywood dismissal bell had just rung. Bobby and I decided we had better get our treats before the rush. The Good Humor Man was closer to us, so we walked over and looked at the price list posted next to the doorless cab. "Fudge bars cost 15 cents, I spoke aloud to Bobby. "Eclairs cost 25. I guess I'll get a fudge bar." Bobby, reading some disappointment in my voice and realizing that I only had 20 cents, said, "Hang on a minute, Jack. I'll run over to Mr. Henry and see what eclairs cost." And Bobby took off. "Hello there, son. Are you ready to order?" asked the cheery voice of the Good Humor Man. Just a minute, please. Bobby is checking on something for me." "Take your time, son." The Good Humor Man took out a cloth and polished the handle of one of the doors as he hummed to himself. "Hey, Jack, Mr. Henry has eclairs for 20 cents. You have enough money for that?" Bobby shouted from across the Gaywood entrance. Wow, I do have enough money for a Mr. Henry Eclair, but I think I still want a fudge bar. Fudge bars cost 15 cents over here, Bobby. What does Mr. Henry charge for a fudge bar? I yelled back at Bobby. Hey kid, if you want something you better get it quick, the good humor man advised me. Here come all the Gaywood kids. He motioned down the sidewalk leading to the school where dozens of kids were heading home in our direction. Jack, fudge bars cost only 10 cents over here, Bobby advised from across the way. The good humor man had heard as clearly as I had. Are you going to buy anything? He asked me. No thanks. I'll get my fudge bar from Mr. Henry today, I answered as I walked away. I looked to my right to see the line of Gaywood kids approaching. I remember thinking that Bobby and I would still have enough time to beat the rush, but then I caught a blur of something white rushing past me on the left. As I turned back to Mr. Henry's truck, I was confused to see the good humor man standing there with his finger stuck into the chest of Mr. Henry. What the heck do you think you're doing? Screamed a red-faced good humor man at Mr. Henry. I'm trying to make a living, answered Mr. Henry. Get that fat finger out of my chest unless you want it broken, suggested Mr. Henry. Well, I've been selling on this corner for 2 years. Take that sorry truck down the block and find your own spot, the good humor man suggested strongly. Rats of Francis, Mr. Henry answered as he delivered a short right to the nose of the good humor man. Bobby and I could hardly believe what was happening. What did he say? I asked Bobby. I'm not sure, but I don't think we should repeat it to our parents. The Gaywood kids had gathered around by now and asked us what was going on. We said we're trying to order a fudge bar, and the two men just started fighting. The good humor man was under Mr. Henry at this point. His nose was bleeding. We caught an occasional word. Undercut my profit, rats a frat, cheap, rats a rat, my territory. The men continued to roll around. Jack, look. Bobby made sure that I noted a large, fresh pile of dog mess that the two men were rolling toward. Oh no! The entire group of kids screamed and laughed as the dog mess smeared across the back of Mr. Henry's shirt. Are they going to sell me a popsicle? One of the younger Gaywood kids asked. Well, maybe when they're finished, Bobby suggested. Now, I guess the cursing and fighting had been going on for about 5 minutes when someone's mother stepped out onto their front porch and shouted above all the racket, "Stop that fighting! You stop that fighting right now!" The woman had quite a voice. "You stop right now or I will call the police! I can't believe you would fight in front of those children!" It worked. They stopped. I think they had pretty much run out of gas anyway. The circle of kids parted to allow both men to return to their trucks. The good humor music had never stopped playing. Kids lined up at both trucks. Several walked back and forth, checking prices. The good humor man pulled his polishing cloth from his pocket, wiped blood away from his face, sat on the curb for a few minutes, pinching his nose until the bleeding stopped. Several customers, tired of waiting, and walked over to Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry, due to a very unpleasant odor, lost several customers that day. I spent an extra nickel that day in order to purchase a fudge bar from a bloody but better smelling vendor. When I got home that day, Mom asked what we had done at Bobby's house. Just the usual, Mom. Oh, and Bobby's mom let me buy a fudge bar.
Where's the press? That's so funny. Our next writer is Adam Short. Adam is the Associate Director for Foundation Relations at Virginia Tech. He lives in Blacksburg with his wife Alyssa, an artist and educator, and his daughter Noemi, and a dog named Lena. In his free time, he tries to write, but mostly finds himself role-playing scenarios from his 3-year-old daughter's imagination. Adam Short reading A Morning Walk.
Morning walk. Morning walk, and my dog strains the leash, the peace moon pale beyond my reach. My headlamp pricks the eyes of a hare, its body line tight, like a direction arrow. My heart knows where to find you. In a brick house sleeping like cats in a heap, my feet fall quickens to the bedroom door. I crack it quietly to watch mother, child breathing. To not disturb, I slip through the quilt, to lie stock still in the slumbering thrall of my moon mother, lover, wife.
Next up on our program is writer Kevin McDaniel. Kevin lives in Pulaski with his wife and 2 daughters. His poems have appeared in several publications and anthologies, such as the Anthology of Appalachian Writers, Emeritus Journal, the Ocean State Review, just to name a few. He is the author of 2 chapbooks, Family Talks and At the Foot of a Mountain, and a forthcoming book of poetry titled Rubbernecking, due to be seen this upcoming spring. Kevin McDaniel reading Granddaddy Longlegs.
Granddaddy Longlegs. Granddaddy, Granddaddy, how do you chaperone those babies down that jagged frontier of harsh stones by the river? Their petite legs pedal hard in the opalescent sun. Granddaddy, Granddaddy, why do you not shilly-shally in this buckram breeze that pushes them downstream? Their precarious forms paddle emotionless water. Granddaddy, Granddaddy, why do you not fuss more about your offspring struggling to swim alone when you know their eyes will open to see a world that feels so cold?
Our next writer is Frank DuPont. Frank has long been a student of history and culture and has written 2 books on historical fiction about the Bronze Age Samaria. He also writes family-centered, creative nonfiction and some poetry. Frank DuPont reading A Day from Harvest.
Hello, everyone. I left my office early to drive my mom to the airport for her flight home. We had agreed to meet in my apartment building's coffee shop. When I arrived, she was at a table on the outdoor patio, reading her favorite book of Don Blanding poetry. Facing toward the waning sun, her blue eyes squinted in the light, but otherwise she looked serene. Her face gave testimony to all of her 84 years, wrinkled as if her skin had been crumpled and then put back in place. I knew she would be holding a cigarette. I pulled a chair around to hers and kissed her on the cheek. She reached up with her free hand and patted me on the shoulder. As I sat down, she said, "I could have taken a cab, you know, but I'm glad you'll see me off. That airport's ginormous, as your sister would say." Her voice sounded as if her throat was dry, but it still projected vitality. She swallowed some of her now lukewarm coffee and frowned. After adding a little more sugar, she sipped again and cleared her throat, and with the back of her hand over her mouth. Neither of us spoke. as we waited for the waiter to fill my cup and refill hers. I fixed my coffee and watched her light a new cigarette from the embers of her previous one. As a distance runner, my lungs rebelled at the smoke. You know, those things are going to kill you, don't you, Mom? Why not plan on a nice old age? She said, I'm lucky to be here at all, you know. She blew the smoke away from me and declared, I don't put much faith in planning. You know the saying, life's uncertain, eat dessert first. Pretty cynical, don't you think? Not cynical, no. Living on a farm made me trust planning a lot less than most folks. How do you mean? I guess I've never told you about why we moved into town when I was a kid. She drew in a long drag on her cigarette and blew the smoke away from me again, silently gathering her memories and preparing what to say. She looked at the cigarette in her hand and frowned, and I noted a slight tremor. After checking her watch, she settled back in her chair. It was one of those Midwestern days in the Missouri flatlands just outside the Ozarks, approaching late afternoon, hotter than hell's doorknob. I'd been inside playing with my doll Beulah, probably bothering our cat, when I heard my father curse out on the porch. He'd been out there smoking his pipe, but he said a word I'd have been switched for if I'd said it, and he said it real loud. Ma and I both hurried out to see what caused him to swear. Mom studied her ashes as she placed them precisely in the ashtray, not typical of her. I was struck by hearing how her speech seemed to revert to a previous stage of life. As soon as we got out the front door fighting the wind, we noticed the greenish sky. There was an enormous bank of clouds, and the wind was whipping up around us, blowing straight at us. I looked up at my dad to see what he was looking at, but it wasn't the sky. It was the fields. 65 acres of wheat, our whole crop, just a day from harvest, bent toward us by the wind. I always loved the color of wheat, amber yellow, like marigold petals. Mom paused again and her voice seemed to droop, like some vital energy was subtracted. Dad ran down the steps of the porch and stood with his arms lifted up in the air, his hands pumping at the clouds and wind as if to hold them back, shouting, "No, no." That was when I saw what he'd been looking at, low down, not up in the sky. The neighbor's field past ours was just disappearing, beaten flat by hail the size of eggs. When it got to our field, the storm continued the massacre, stomping the stalks to the ground until it was just a sea of trampled grass, and just that valuable. By this time, my mother's mouth was quavering, her lips a downturned arc, her hands shaking even more. She inhaled another puff from her cigarette before resuming her tale. Dad came up the steps before the hail reached him, and we all stood together under the porch roof watching our crop die. Then there was just the field, shining like broken glass. The hailstorms were already melting off in the heat, the damage complete. Her eyes moist, Mom started to gather her things, but paused to say, "Could be why I don't put much stock in planning ahead, son, maybe." That was the only time I ever saw my daddy cry.
Coming up next is writer Leslie Porter. Leslie has been writing poetry since about the 3rd grade. She She is inspired by the natural world and the work of Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Leslie Porter reading In a Cicada's Wing.
In a cicada's wing, green effervescence stirs awakening, a welling up from 17 years of stillness, a climbing out of subterranean sleep and a call for becoming new beings, leaving. Shells perfectly wholly slit empty, copper calling cards of night exits, birthed from a secret dirt home to the above. Up among red maples, white pines, and short, stumpy dogwoods, wings beat synchronous, camouflaged, in great buzzing song, signifying high summer. Humidity and sudden staccato rain showers, punctuating notes echoing across parched grass, entangled, embraced, central to summer's hot breaths and gentle sunsetting sighs. Soon it is time, in shining, writhing beauties, fallen like petals of a cherry tree, rasp, creeping with feeble buzzes and clicks, grounded, world-weary, having given all of their energy, all of their life force, all to trees, sky, and earth above. Lying, still glittering on grass and cement, shells once again, life within them joins the breeze, transferred, continuing on.
So joining us back on stage with another selection is writer Adam Short reading A Spigot Handle.
A spigot handle. A spigot handle, shaped like an open-work flower, its appearance reminded me of a plum blossom. Normally, it would be threaded to the top of a waterspout. One hard torque would tamp the flow of cold water to the hose, or it could be loosened to release a pulsing stream into the flower bed to turn fertile dirt into mud. However, the handle was broken and discarded. I found it half swallowed in the ground. When I picked it up, I instantly liked how the bulbous metal felt pressed into my palm. I touched winter and thought of spring.
Our next writer is Tom McGoey. Tom taught composition and directed the Writing Center at Wake Forest University. He is now retired and lives in New Bern, Virginia, where he spends his free time working with literacy volunteers and the Wilderness Road Regional Museum. He has published essays in the fourth genre, Thread, and Sport Literate. Tom McGoey reading Glow Coat Commando.
Glowcoat Commando. You could spot a fake spit shine on a pair of army jump boots if you knew what to look for, such as evidence of a glowcoat shine. Glowcoat was a popular floor wax designed to make the lives of post-war suburban housewives easier. What paratrooper first figured out that it had military applications as well is not known. If St. Michael is the patron saint of the airborne, then the inventor of Glowcoat is probably a candidate for beatification, for providing lazy or hungover soldiers with a cheap and time-saving alternative for an instant spit shine. Some research chemists for the Johnson Company Home Products Division, I'm guessing. Exposure to direct sunlight on hot days would cause the black kiwi polish beneath the wax coat to melt, a big problem in northern Italy, where I was stationed with the 509th Airborne. You could avoid this problem in the morning inspection at 0900 hours because the sun wasn't high enough to cause melting. The post-lunch formation, however, at 1300 hours was another matter. Lots of weeping boots then. That's when you'd hear your comrades mocking chant, "Glowcoat Commando, you're gagging." I admit I was on both sides of that public trashing. Yes, I too was a Glowcoat Commando on occasion, when I'd spent the previous evening playing cards and drinking and stumbled into my bunk at lights out, too tired to prep my boots. A genuine spitshine required a can of kiwi shoe polish, preferably heated, a clean white cotton t-shirt, wrapped around the wrist and index and middle finger, or cotton balls, and a glass of water. Some guys preferred a cloth diaper because they were thicker and softer, providing a more absorbent and smoother application. But they were harder to come by because the young mothers on the base usually bought out the limited supply carried by the PX. After applying a thick base of warmed kiwi and buffing it with a shoe brush, you started the laborious part of raising a shine by using a dampened cloth or cotton ball to add dabs of more kiwi and rubbing it into the boot in a tight circular motion. I never saw anyone use real spit for a shine, so I can't comment on the comparative chemical properties of saliva versus barracks tap water. Raising a top-notch shine can take hours to produce with new boots. Once you'd produced a good base, a few minutes of daily maintenance was all it took to keep a high shine. A glow coat shine, though, required no patient rubbing and buffing, just a quick swipe with a cotton ball. The liquid was a bit runny, so you had to be careful not to let it spill over the perforated stitching border that separated the toe from the rest of the boot. Another dead giveaway. A glow coat shine was harder than a kiwi shine, and therefore held up better under scuff marks. It was a cardinal sin to step on another man's boots and scratch his shine. The number one criterion for a Strack spit shine was whether you could see your reflection in the toes of your boots. A glow coat shine produced a sharper image of your face, but not necessarily a truer one. It had the glossy, touched-up look of a model in a cosmetic ad. A kiwi shine was a little hazier. The outlines of your face were blurrier and darker, like looking into the surface of a murky pond. A kiwi shine suggested unseen depths, not available to the naked eye. Depths conjured only in your imagination. Such mysterious self-portraits, when I summon them now, cause me to wonder, who was that guy that jumped out of airplanes? What happened to him? Does some part of him still exist? Or was he a shiny illusion all along? To answer these questions, I'm thinking of buying a new pair of jump boots and spending my days shining them until I see the real me in them. What would he look like now, over 40 years later? A study in gagging? A malfunction in mental chute deployment? I'm afraid of heights now. I get nervous climbing a ladder to clean the gutters. An oversized golf umbrella has replaced the silk canopy I once dangled beneath at 1,200 feet, the ground rising up to smack me, or spear me like the tree that snagged me on a jump in Scotland, with wind so high I thought I'd get blown out over the North Sea. I was splayed crosswise in the branches, wrapped in the nylon suspension lines like a moth in a spider's web. I had to be cut loose and lowered to the ground by a team of drop zone spotters. Thankfully, no one recorded this embarrassing scene with a Kodak Instamatic. It would have ended up on the duty roster board in the squad bay with the handwritten caption, "Wrong tree, dummy." Be all you can be, exhorted those army recruiting ad campaigns in the 80s. Some copywriter's ironic riff on existentialism, I suppose. How many tins of kiwi would it take to resurrect Strack Tom or some middling facsimile? Do I really want to see this? A portrait of alienation in a middle-aged man with pacifist leanings emerging from the black abyss of melted boot polish? Stranger to myself, I am.
Allow me to bring back to the podium writer Kevin McDaniel, reading On Sing on the Towpath, A Halt.
This next piece I want to share with you today is actually an example of what is known as an ekphrastic poem, which is essentially a poem about a painting. And the painting that I have here with me today is actually called On the Towpath, A Halt. And it's by American Impressionist Theodore Robinson. And it was painted in 1892, just a few years before his death. Where I first encountered this painting was actually back in May at the Artemis Journal launch at the Taubman Museum. And I guess when I saw it, what really stood out to me, of course, is the colors. But I kept wondering about this boy here, where he was going with these two beasts that he has. So I started wondering about that story. But I also want to thank the committee today for allowing me to share this. I just felt like it was only fitting. Thank you, Aaron. On Sing, On the Towpath, A Halt. Theodore Robinson, where is your boy? In brown cap, brown coat, brown breeches, rambling too down a dirt pathway. If a snake slinked in front of his horses, I bet he'd hand clasp the reins as the white and brown brutes trample greenery dabbed on a steep mountain slope. He'd hock, spittle, and brush off his pant legs before casting again a dogged stare that your brush arrested in the minute when he might have looked back at his run-down daddy who decided it was time for a son's journey under blue laundered sky, the morning a boy becomes a man. Thank you.
Our next writer is Taylor Leitner. Taylor Leitner is a first-year PhD student in engineering education at Virginia Tech. She just recently graduated from Clemson University with her bachelor's in industrial engineering this past May. She is excited on embarking on her new journey here in Blacksburg. Taylor Leitner reading The Tailor's Prayer.
The Tailor's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Can you hear me now? I was told that you sit high and look low, and for my sake, I hope this is true. You sent your only begotten Son because you love the world so. So, hallowed be thy name. It will forever reign as it heals the lame. Thy kingdom come, maybe sooner than we think, but whom shall we be afraid? I am who I am anyway. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Align our vision and our direction. Give us this day, oh happy day, our daily bread and peace that surpasses all. And forgive us for our debts. For there are so many, I start to think that I am unworthy and should fall. If I had 7 tongues, that would not be enough. But that's not the part that's tough. It's the next part that says, as we forgive those that trespass against us. Yes, that means the people that left, abused, took advantage, savages that caused the hurt and pain that replays in my brain. Why is it so hard to let go and be free? Because at that point, mass is intensified by acceleration and comes the force of gravity. As I proceed, I ask that you lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Since Adam and Eve, we have been deceived, confused about what to believe, taught to have a heart with greed, but that just can't be me. I experienced the resurrection. For countless times, my soul has felt dead. Yet my soul cannot be declared dead underground, for where it seems like I am buried, I am planted, and my lost purpose is found. For thine is the kingdom. Let your light shine on top of a hill for all to see. The almighty power and the bloodshed glory, forever and ever. Amen.
And closing out our Fall Valley Voices program is writer Phyllis Uhas. Phyllis retired from the Wake County, North Carolina Sheriff's Office in 2013 and then promptly moved to Blacksburg to marry her love, John Uhas. She says her varied career choices in life exposed her to challenging people, bewildering but also inspiring experiences, and gave her a plethora of ideas that she now has time to explore and express through writing. Phyllis Uhas reading Wabi Sabi.
Perfection, the bane of mother's life. Sugar leveled off at exactly the red mark for 1/4 cup. Gleaming glass bowl ready to receive egg whites that have not one speck of the egg yolk in them. Meringue whipped perfectly. Grandiose peaks standing at attention, ready to be toasted golden brown so they can give a thumbs up to the creator of the lemon icebox pie. Imperfection, the bane of mother's life. Exact measurements of sugar consume chunks of time. 5 or 6 attempts to achieve the exact amount of sugar. Pour sugar, gently shake the measuring cup to level off its contents. Take some out, put some back in. Crouch down beside the counter to see if sugar is even with 1/4 line. Repeat sequence if necessary. Result, life minutes ticked off the clock to get the amount just right, but a look of satisfaction on mother's face. Perfection, a sparkling glass bowl, not washed in the dishwasher, mind you, but by hand to more perfectly clean the bowl. Why? Because just a tad of greasy residue can keep the eggs from achieving their stiff peaks. Result? Red, pruny, shriveled hands. But the bowl is now the perfect receiver for the opalescent fluid and reflects my mother's smiling face. Broken eggshells, however, stack up beside the sparkling bowl. Crack egg over a secondary bowl. Allow the white to slip into bowl while egg yolk remains in the shell. Pass yolk back and forth between shell halves until all the white has escaped. If one iota of yolk contaminates the white, down the disposal it goes. And the process continues until 3 pure egg whites reside in their proper receptacle. Result? An unusually large egg bill for the week, but a perfect meringue and a joyful expression on mother's face. Perfection, the bane of my life, always trying to achieve mother's idea of perfection. Am I doomed to repeat her obsession? I dread the tedious moments of separating yolk from egg white. Anxiety creeps down my arms into my hands as I pass the egg yolks back and forth between the ragged edged shells. Can I do it? Only one more egg white to separate, then I'm done. Imperfection, the bane of my life. I allow mother's compulsion to get under my skin. Oops. Concentrating on my anxiety rather than the egg separation process, I mistakenly filtered the egg white over my gleaming bowl of perfect ones. I peer uneasily into the abyss of albumin. Oh no, there it is, a yellow dot in the white pool. There are no other eggs to crack open. Company will be here soon. Do I do it? Do I go ahead and beat the egg whites, and even though they are contaminated by one minuscule blip of yolk? You're damn right I did. I can't not have dessert. My husband would be upset that this important meal is missing the lemon icebox pie his boss requested. And you know, it works. My meringue is beautiful. Not one sign of that damn yellow speck that could have caused a culinary catastrophe, much less a stumbling block to my husband's desired promotion. Such joy over what some might consider a trivial matter, but it's a liberating moment for me. Result, wabi-sabi. That's what the Japanese call finding beauty in imperfection, which I experienced that afternoon so many decades ago. Imperfect caterpillar moments can morph into perfect butterfly opportunities that bring smiles forever and ever remembered. Often beautiful swans have first masqueraded as imperfect, ugly ducklings. All they need is a right person to believe that their blemishes can be turned into beauty marks. Wabi-sabi, dear mother, that's me. I'm wabi-sabi. I hope you saw beauty in my imperfections, that I brought joy into your life. And now here I am, lemon icebox in hand, meringues a mile high. Do you have a smile on your face, Mother? Do I finally get a thumbs up?
Well, thank you so much for joining us for our Fall 2008 celebration of Valley Voices. Let's give our writers another round of applause. So, as we round out our program, please join us for light refreshments and coffee, which are through these doors in the library. You'll see them. And these are compliments of Valley Voices. And everyone, please enjoy the rest of your afternoon and take care.